Riot don't care about the lore anymore. When the 2023 cinematic came out, people got scared that Riot was putting the game on maintenance mode. But you know what didn't even get to maintenance mode and was dissed immediately? The lore. Short answer, they haven't released a story that wasn't a compulsory short story in 9 months. You want the long answer? Let me explain. I can't believe I even have to say this, but for those of you who don't know, Universe of League of Legends, or casually called Lore Universe, is a dedicated website for the lore. It's where you can find almost everything lore related about League, from the short stories to comics and even lore insights from the devs. Way back in either 2017 or 2018, I can't remember, Riot released an article which pretty much said that they would update LoL Universe once every week or 2 weeks with a new short story. And I swear this article doesn't even exist anymore. All I could find or remember was that this was the cover art for the article. If someone could find it for me and leave it in the comments, I'd honestly be shocked, because I feel like Riot went out of their way to leave no trace of this article like some CIA hush campaign. I mentioned this article because Riot was actually really consistent with the weekly, bi-weekly lore updates up until early 2022. But then something happened. If we look at the explore page on Universe and scroll down just a little bit, trust me, you don't need to scroll far to get to the end of last year. You see what's been posted in chronological order. There's a story from December 2021 that teases the next Legends of Runeterra expansion, which is good. The one after that is a background story behind that year's cinematic, which is fine, I guess. But then it starts getting kind of sussy. The next story is pretty much a damage control story for the Sentinels of Light event, followed by 2 filler color stories, and then there's a story about an alternate universe, which, though it's a good story, has nothing to do with the canon lore. An actually good, impactful story, followed by a color story again, which is literally just a worded version of Belvet's announcement cinematic, with a little bit more added on. Then there's the obligatory Pride Month story, followed by another color story. Don't get me wrong, these stories are well written, and I absolutely don't mean to discredit the hard, passionate work of the writers. What I'm trying to bring attention to is the reason behind the writing of these stories and what they actually accomplish. The Faceless God is actually a really good story that expands the world and lore, exploring my personal favorite part of Runeterra, which is the Darken. The concerning part is that this story came out more than a year ago. In that time, the only story that's come close to quality or impact is The Eyes and the Embers, which expands the demonic lore of Runeterra and Noxus's involvement with it and some backstory on Annie. The color stories being mediocre isn't even the writer's fault, like I said. They're doing the best with what they're given, but most of them just feel like rehashed versions of the characters' bios from a different perspective. Right on Time and The Unexpected Spark are par for the course and aren't anything spectacular, and were written for the sole reason that Riot feels the need to release a mediocre short story with every champion release. They don't really add anything extra to the world or the lore, they just restate things from the bio that we already know. Now, if we make the traumatizing mistake of scrolling back to the top, we see that the only things that Riot has uploaded to the universe since Neela's release are the Star Guardian comics in July of 2022, which was more than half a year ago, and another useless color story. Let me just say it again, the stories themselves aren't necessarily badly written, and the Star Guardian comics are genuinely really good. It's just the jarring lack of care from Riot's end that makes me really sad. The authors of these stories only write when and what Riot tells them to, and the content in these stories being anything of relevance is just becoming more and more rare. Now we compare the miserable state of Universe in 2022 to the best year of League lore arguably ever. 2020 is what I consider the peak of League of Legends lore, and its end signaled the end of the golden age. And 2021 is what I believe to be the beginning of the end, but I'll get into that in its own segment. Even by ignoring the contents of the stories and looking only at the numbers game, we can see the decline very clearly. In 2020, we had an astounding 50 additions to Universe, which averages out to more than 4 entries a month, or once a week like the ancient article foretold. Compare this to the absolutely pathetic 15 entries in the entirety of 2022, which averages out to 1.25 entries a month. Even if we take out all the cinematics, the KDA comics, and the alternate universe stories, 2020 still had 38 entries, which is more than double of what we got in 2022, which includes the 5 non-canon volumes of the Star Guardian comics. I don't know what else I can show or tell you to convince you that Riot simply doesn't care anymore, and I think the reason behind it is pretty simple. I'm willing to say that less than 5% of the player base read the lore to any extent. The average player's knowledge of the lore comes down to Spirit Blossom cinematics, the paragraph in every champion's overview section, and the fucking loading screen tips. And from some depressing angle, I get it. Riot just doesn't want to invest as many resources into an area of their IP that the vast majority of players don't even know exists, let alone care about, when they could be spending that money on the next esport tournament or batch of skins. And this lack of care stretches beyond just the number of stories that they upload. Riot shows an uncharacteristic lack of polish on Universe when compared to everything else they do. There are stories that are straight up missing from pages where they should be, and some things like champion specific cinematics aren't even on the website, which is weird because all their cinematics with the same champions in them are. Quick example, the 2018 cinematic is from a time when the season start cinematics just showed random flashy stuff happening, rather than lore related stuff which only started in 2019 2019 with the Awaken cinematic. Anyway, the Climb cinematic has brief cameos from Yasuo and Echo, but it isn't listed on Yasuo's page, but for some reason it is on Echo's page. But the Kin of the Stained Blade, you know, the 15-minute long anime episode which has 10 million views and probably cost $500,000 to make, isn't even on Universe, let alone on Yasuo and Yone's pages. And don't even get me started on the pitiful excuse of a map. If anything, this should be the most prominent thing on Universe, because the idea of sitting down for 10 to 15 minutes and reading something in 2023 is a sick fucking joke. But it literally shows Mordekaiser's pre-rework icon in the Shadow Isles. Clearly they don't care about Universe anymore, but there's one more segment of Universe that's so neglected it makes Amumu look like a celebrity. Runeterra is arguably one of the best fantasy worlds ever written, and I think this is in large part due to its relatively young age. Because it's only been properly fleshed out for like 6 to 7 years, it's had the opportunity to learn from and avoid the pitfalls of other big fantasy worlds like Warcraft or the Elder Scrolls. But what about the alternate universes that are based on the skins and champions we love so much? They have extremely fleshed out stories too, and because they exist solely to sell skins and make money, you'd assume Riot pays it more attention. Let's go through every single alternate universes page on Universe and see how much Riot really cares about them. Just to clarify, every skin line has a bit of a story behind it with the flavor text you can read in the client, but this isn't an alternate universe. An example of these smaller alt universes would be something like Cafe Cuties or Crime City Nightmare. I consider a proper alternate universe a world with its own stories or cinematics outside of just the client. Out of Riot's 5 best-selling skins, 4 of them have their own alternate universe with their own stories and worlds. These are KDA, Star Guardian, Spirit Blossom, and Project. And another big one, which is a personal favorite of mine but isn't a bestseller, is Odyssey. Now let's go into Universe and see how Riot treats these beloved alternate universes whose sole purpose is to make Riot money. So surely, if not for the sake of the fans, for the sake of their own profit, they'll invest some resource into making it presentable and up to date on their dedicated lore website, right? The page for the Star Guardian still shows the skins from 2017 front and center. The latest update to the page was in 2019 when Xayah, Rakan, and Zoe got their skins. And Xayah and Rakan are nowhere to be seen anywhere on the page, only Zoe's face. If you click on the read bio section, only the Burning Bright team is there, which is 5 out of 24 champions in the Star Guardian universe as of 2023. God help any poor soul who wants to catch up on the story of the recent event, because there's no way to rewatch or reread the visual novel. The only way you can catch up on the limited time event story is to watch Daddy Necrod's nearly 2-hour-long collection of explained videos. The comic? Nowhere to be seen. The cinematic or the music video? Nope. I bet most of you didn't even know that Seraphine's vlogs even existed. The only reason I know that these things even exist is because I'm an absolute fiend for alternate universe content, and I would stalk the event website and Riot's social media page for even the smallest drop of more. But the average player would have no clue. Rather than show these cool extra bits of world building to the player, Riot would rather shove the visual novel down everybody's throat that everybody skips anyway just to get their emotes and loot. There wasn't even a link to the universe page during the event, for God's sake, let alone anything else. Let's move on to the next alternate universe, Spirit Blossom. Oof, absolute banger event. You guys remember, right? The release of Yone, the long hinted champion who's been in the lore for the past 7 years. Actually a fun dating simulator with funny dialogue that you didn't just skip through to get the rewards. Next is Blitz game mode, and the best for last, the creme de la creme, absolute cheek spreading, ball busting, mind boggling double whammy of cinematics with the Path and Ionian Myth and the Kin of the Stained Blade. Personally, one of the most memorable events they've ever done, tied with Burning Bright Star Guardians in 2017. Let's check on the Universe website, so I have a one-stop shop to see all this amazing alternate universe content in one place. Oh, they never even made one. The Spirit Blossom website is just information on how to get tokens and loot. Again, there's no way for anyone who missed it to be able to replay or reread the dating simulator. Nowhere in the clients during the entire event did they even think of mentioning the perennial story, which, without reading it, the first cinematic almost makes no sense. And God forbid Riot tell people about the Sisterhood of War, the 3-part series of short stories, which is pretty much a fucking novella at this point, and the entire reason this Spirit Blossom event in particular was so important and got its own in-game event to tie it into the lore. Next, my personal favorite story on a universe of all time is the Odyssey event story, the lore, and Riot released a second wave of Odyssey skins. Surely they updated the page for the alternate universe with another top quality story about intergalactic bounty hunters and cross-dimensional godlike beings. Nope, the last time they updated the universe page for Odyssey was when Galaxy Slayer Z came out in April of 2019, and all they added was a few extra paragraphs and a picture. I had to piece together how the story advanced after the release of the second batch of skins like some corkboard madman, and what did I find? The the story didn't progress at all. We went from Kain trying to hunt down Sona to it remaining in the exact same spot. Rather than using these new characters to advance the story, they gave them their own self-contained story and left the old ones in the same spot. Also, in my opinion, using the flavor text as the sole way to tell the new stories is the dumbest, laziest, no-effort cop-out idea ever. The flavor text should be what incentivizes people to go and check out the other more fleshed out content, not the cheap way to get out of putting effort into an actual story. The Project skin line, which is tied with Odyssey as my favorite alternate universe, has the most skins in the entire game and is one of the best selling skin lines ever. But yet again, there isn't even a dedicated page for the lore of this amazing cyberpunk world that the passionate writers at Riot have created. Again, I have to become a detective with a PhD and 3 brains just to be able to create some semblance of a coherent story. And just like Odyssey, there's an amazing short story for the Project universe called Of Rats and Cats and Neon Mice that came out with the Hunters batch that isn't even on Universe. You can only access it by going onto the fandom wiki page for Project or directly searching for it by name on Google. Searching for it on Universe gives you nothing, and there's no dedicated segment for Project where you would be able to find it. Finally, we have KDA, Riot's best-selling skin line ever. Surely they keep up to date the alternate universe page on them. These are Riot's favorite daughters, for crying out loud. And when you click on the universe page, bro, once again, it's the same shit. There's no trace of anything that came after Popstars in 2018. When you compare the effort they put in, it's just sad. In 2018, they released an entire fictional interview with the characters onto Universe to give them character and flesh it out. Riot did something similar with the Instagram page with the EP, but that wasn't even mentioned in the client, let alone on Universe. None of the promo material for the all-out EP is on the website. Neither are the videos that they made for the fans, and neither is the comic. And meanwhile, True Damage is just in Riot's basement crying and begging for attention, completely forgotten and abandoned. The Sentinels of Light event has been broken down by people much more knowledgeable than me in great depth, so I'll link both TB Skyen and Necred's video in the description for those who want to know more. But as a short TLDR to those who didn't pay attention to the lore during the event, it was an absolute clusterfuck, with 3 different continuities which no one knows which was canon or not. The characters that we saw in the visual novel might not have even been there, and don't even get me started on the fucking plot holes. After the Sentinels of Light event, I think Riot just got scared, and there's a bunch of ways we can see this. Look at some of the stories that came out on Universe after the event. In Battle Broken is Riot trying to fix what they did to Pantheon during the event as a form of damage control, and Oyster Bill is just another color story which has the same purpose, to give lore that should have already been in the event. And as soon as Riot smelled even a whiff of criticism, it seems like they immediately thought, alright, people don't like the lore anymore, and cut their losses and reallocated all their resources. This probably isn't what happened, but that's how it comes off as there's evidence to support this point too. After the Sentinels of Light event, this withdrawal from the lore is probably what resulted in the measly 6 canon stories that we got in 2022. And this isn't the first time we've seen a panic response like this from Riot. Take what happened with KDA for example. Popstars in 2018 was a massive hit and everybody loved it. Riot decided to double down, and in 2019 we got True Damage, which even though it has less views, I feel was just as well received. But then when All Out came out in 2020, people were kinda iffy about getting the same fictional band thing 3 years in a row, which by the way, I don't agree with at all. I literally suck a dick to get more KDA or True Damage, but I can completely understand why people were not so down with it. But then we saw Riot get scared. Rather than try to reinvent the fictional band thing or try a different angle on it, they went with the Arcane theme for 2021, which honestly I was down with. It let them promote their banger anime and take a break from KDA and True Damage for a year, which would have let them create even more hype when they came back in 2022. But then Worlds 2022 came out and we got Lil Nas X in League of Legends. 2 years without the fictional ban showed that Riot thought that people didn't really like it anymore, which couldn't be farther from the truth, and rather than use the year break to create hype or reinvent the idea, they completely ditched it. And now I feel like Riot is doing this same thing again with the lore. Believe it or not, there used to be a dedicated tab in the client for Universe where you could see news stories and lore related announcements, but that tab has been missing for eons at this point. The final nail in the coffin for this argument about Riot being scared of lore is the Void event. It had been teased and speculated about even before the Sentinels of Light event, and when Belveth got an entire cinematic with her release and her pin-reveal color story that was supposed to be teasing the Void event, I genuinely thought it was gonna happen, and then nothing. The lack of a Void event was what really sold me on the fact that Riot is scared to invest resources into the lore, and now I can slowly feel it bleeding out. Anybody who's into the League lore to a good extent knows that Legends of Runeterra is the only thing that's kept the lore afloat after the Sentinels of Light atrocity. Every expansion that comes out adds more and more cards that expand the worlds to a crazy extent, not only through the flavor text but through the art as well. Because cards in Legends of Runeterra don't all have to be champions, they can tell stories about everything from people, animals, places, and even objects. The Tales of Runeterra series was a promotional series for the card game and was literally perfect. It was easy to consume for people who aren't into the lore, but mentioned things and had small Easter eggs for more diehard lore fans, and it all culminated in the release of Legends of Runeterra. Runeterra gave us a glimpse into what the daily lives of the champions are like rather than a plot-based story, which is a really nice way of switching up how the lore is presented. And the dialogue between the cards creates even more better world building, which shows us how different characters would react to meeting each other.
Reporting in.
What the is that?
And another somewhat minor thing about Legends of Runeterra is that it doesn't always necessarily focus on champions to be the driving force of some of its stories. There are characters who have their own little stories without any impact of a champion character. For example, there's a character called Cytherea who has her own self-contained story of her going from being a fresh-faced recruit to becoming a hero in Demacia. Or Dr. Eslanger, who's slowly figuring out how to emulate Vladimir's blood magic and get closer and closer to perfecting the Grey Legion. The only problem with the lore in Legends of Runeterra is that it can't progress the story forward in any meaningful way. Everything that happens in the cards are either extra world building or a kind of what if scenario. Originally when the game came out, everything was supposed to be 100% canon, but as more and more cards got added and crazier shit started happening, everybody kind of just unanimously agreed that some of it had to be hypothetical. A perfect example of this is in the latest expansion. This character Zolani makes Viego and the Ruin Nation look like a glass of spilled milk in terms of severity, but there isn't even a whisper of it on Universe. And since everything on Universe is supposed to be 100% canon, the fact that it isn't even on there makes you wonder whether it's even happening or not. And then Kane's entire existence as a character is a paradox, because neither the Shadow Assassin or Rast can take over, otherwise it'll just defeat the entire point of his character. But the story can't move forward in a meaningful way if neither the Shadow Assassin or Rast don't take over. As a whole, Legends of Runeterra is the best thing that we have, and honestly it could be a lot worse. One of the strongest parts about the lore of Runeterra as a whole is Runeterra itself. More and more world building is better than a plot-based story, because trying to appease the fans of 162 champions by making a satisfying story is literally impossible. But it does make me sad that the entire Darkened saga was a wasted opportunity, and the only thing even slightly related to it on Universe is the Faceless God story. But the backstory and world building it creates around the Darken is fantastic. Also, getting to see what Kane's been up to after becoming the master of the Order of Shadows is really cool, as it brings a sense of continuity after the ending of the Z comic. For those of you who are curious, Kane's turned the Order of Shadows into this weird cult that hunts down Darken weapons. I don't know what the future is for the League of Legends lore. The Universe website is in shambles, and so is the canon timeline right now. Maybe when the MMO comes out, the story will take a more structured approach, but for that we'll just have to wait and see. Riot did just release a video saying that they're gonna do something about it, but I'm skeptical to say the least, because all they said was we're gonna fix it, rather than tell us what they're actually gonna do. The lore is a shadow of its former self, and as of the beginning of 2023, I'm literally praying every night that someone at Riot decides to show the Universe website some love, because without Universe serving as the backbone of the lore, everything else will just be kind of mediocre. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. The support I've been getting on my recent content has been absolutely insane, more than I ever thought I'd ever get. As of the release of this video, I'll be streaming on Twitch again. I don't know how often, and I don't know what, probably League, but I'll try to do it at least 3 times a week. I'm so lucky to have an opportunity like this, and I'm literally fighting tooth and nail to try and not fumble it. The content of this video was kind of gloomy and depressing, but it's something I was really passionate about, and I felt like somebody had to talk about it. Like and subscribe, new video every week, alternating between League video and anime video every other week. Stay tuned. Later.